How are you, Matthew?
Good, thank you. How are you going, Chris?
Good. Now, the local council meeting was on Thursday last week, so we have a lot to talk about.
We do. It was actually, just to clarify there, it was the committee meetings.
Committee meetings.
Not the council meeting.
Oh.
And the main reason that's important is that committee meetings don't make resolutions of council. They make recommendations to council, and then 2 weeks after the committee meetings, we have the council meeting where those decisions are ratified, or they might be changed, but they're not final decisions until they go to the council meeting.
Okay, so first up about this expression of interest for the Dream Festival. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, so that was one that we put out previously. You'll remember that the Dream Festival has been run by a committee for a number of years. About 2011, I think it started, Dream Festival. And it got to the stage a couple of years ago where it got too big. The committee said, it's such a big event now, we need someone else to run it, we need council to run it. So council did run it, they ran it for a year, and then an analysis of that, looking at what we do and how we do it, in terms of the staff time that was involved, in terms of the overall operation, it wasn't seen that it's the best way to do it in terms of council run it. So we went out to an EOI. We said, we don't want the Dream to die. We don't want to run it ourselves. Who out there in the community, what organisation wants to run the Dream Festival? And so we got 2 expressions of interest that came in. One was really a supporting expression of interest. So it wasn't saying they wanted to do it, but they'd support another organisation doing it. And another one was from Orascon, who do some great work around Dubbo, and they said, yes, we'll do it. In their expression of interest, they talked about their background and the different things that they've done and how they're a very effective organisation, which I think they are. Didn't put a lot of detail around what they would do with that Dream, how they would make Dream look what it would look like at the end of it all. So in the end, the recommendation from the committee meetings last week was to put the Dream Festival into abeyance, which means don't have a Dream Festival this year. The $40,000 we had allocated would then go to 2 other areas. So the Spark committee would make a decision about where that money would go, and you'd also have the event assistance fund. So there'd be basically money going into the community for other different events, other different functions, but still in the community, and basically don't run the Dream this year. Now that's not the final decision. I'm sure there'll be more discussion amongst councillors this week and next week before a final decision is made at the council meeting in 2 weeks' time, or Thursday week. But that's the direction of council at the moment, the idea of not running a Dream Festival this year.
Well, definitely give them more time to plan.
Well, again, depending on what happens next year, but there's no definite plans for next year either. The recommendation from the committee meeting was just to put it in abeyance.
I hope they have something for the kids. Like, I know they've got a lot of things going for the kids, but the older kids maybe putting on a party somewhere.
Are you talking about people like you, older kids?
Yes, who love going to dance parties. Maybe something like that. That'd be good to have with the Dream Festival, because you've got all the other events, you've got the lanterns and all the everything else, but something in that nature I feel might make it a bit more interesting.
It might, but just to reiterate, there's no plan at this stage, there's no plan for any Dream Festival this year.
No, but anyway, just something to keep in mind, the organisers.
Sure.
But anyway, look, there's something really interesting going on with this Dubbo firming power station. That sounds like a really good idea.
Well, it is an excellent idea and good for Dubbo as well. We know we've got lots of renewable energy being produced around the Dubbo region. We're part of the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone. 37 different renewable projects at various stages of planning in the renewable energy zone. But one of the things that's here in Dubbo, which is being proposed by Squadron Energy, is a firming power station. Now, what a firming power station does is basically brings power online quickly when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. And in this particular one, they're using hydrogen. Now, they'll produce that hydrogen when they've got excess renewable energy, which is a great concept. So you're then producing green hydrogen. They'll then initially start using that green hydrogen with some traditional gases to basically be able to bring that power online when they need that in a short period of time, spending about $190 million on this project. The land where they'll be using this is in the industrial zone along Yarrandale Road, industrial land that's sitting there. Now, we did talk to Squadron and say, well, it's not exactly one of the normal renewable energy projects where you'd normally have some type of voluntary planning agreement associated with it, but it's associated with renewables, so is there any way you could see fit to give council some money in terms of a planning agreement? And Squadron Energy, I must admit, have been very good to deal with so far. And they actually said, yeah, we won't pay you the normal 1.5% that we'd normally pay you though. We'll give you 0.5%. So that's $950,000. And then we had a discussion about how they want to see that money used, because they really are volunteering. They're really donating that money to council. So we think it's fair enough they've got a pretty good say in what they use it for. We gave them a number of our strategies. They picked out of those strategies our public art strategy. So if that all goes ahead, then that'll be $950,000 towards our public art strategy, which I think is fantastic. The one thing that happened at the committee meeting last Thursday night that was interesting was that a councillor brought forward the idea of keeping that money just within a 15-kilometre radius of the firming power station. Now that's up on Yarrandale Road, as I mentioned, so that would mean that you'd basically spend that money in Dubbo only. You wouldn't spend it in Wongarbin or Geary or Wellington or Stewarttown or any of the areas around our LGA. It would just be in Dubbo. And I actually put a little post on social media yesterday because yesterday was the 8-year anniversary of the amalgamation between Dubbo and Wellington. And in that post I did say that we've really got to get past the old Wellington Shire, Dubbo City Council boundaries and treat the LGA as one LGA. 7,536 square kilometres, one LGA. I don't agree with the 15-kilometre radius. That'll be interesting to see what happens at the council meeting, whether that still goes ahead. But I think we should spend that money on our public art strategy across the entire LGA. Yeah. Let's just treat us as one LGA rather than have little petitions of that LGA. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But the good news is public art strategy, which we had the strategy for, but we never had the funding for it, we might end up with funding for it from this firming power station.
Well, it seems like just yesterday that you amalgamated.
Well, careful there. I didn't amalgamate us, Chris. The state government amalgamated us. I was certainly against it at the time.
Not you, but anyway.
Yes.
But it's one other thing that we like to talk about here is the Squadron Energy regarding advanced water treatment, wastewater treatment, I should say.
Yeah, Squadron Energy again in this particular scenario. Now, one of the things that's interesting, Chris, in our community in Dubbo, and this is just on the Dubbo water treatment and sewage treatment now, so it's not the entire LGA because we've got different water treatment and sewage treatment plants in different parts of the LGA. But in Dubbo, in different years, we use different amounts of water, but usually anywhere from about 8 gigalitres of water up to about 11 gigalitres of water we put through our water treatment plant to treat that to be potable water, drinkable water, and then send that through our distribution network around Dubbo. That means we've got to have licences for that much water. Coming out the other end, our sewage treatment plant, typically we have around about 3 gigalitres to 4 gigalitres of water that we send out to our farm, Pine Avon. After that water's been treated to a certain level, it's then used to grow, say, lucerne crops, sometimes I think even wheat crops, but basically use that water in a farming environment. Now, there might be other ways we can use that water that gives a better return on the investment there. So Squadron Energy said, we need water for construction. They've got a lot of projects they're constructing in the near future around our renewable energy zone. They've got to pay for those water licences normally and they get expensive. They said, we'd love to do something where we could get a guarantee of water for our processes that we need for the construction, but we also wouldn't mind leaving some sort of long-term legacy for Dubbo. So they said, could we build something on your sewage treatment plant that treated the water to a higher level so that we could use it for construction, and then maybe afterwards you could use that water for putting on fields, to watering fields, or whatever you might want to use it for, because it would be treated to a higher level. At the moment, the water that comes out of our sewage treatment plant, we can take that to our farm to grow crops with it, but we can't put it in our sporting fields, for example, so it's not of a high enough quality to do that. So we've gone down this process. Now, this is one of the things that it's very rare for councils to do this, but there's a thing called a PPP, a public-private partnership. And if you want to do a PPP, it means that you're basically entering into an agreement where you've got public, as in a government body, council, and private, as in a private company like Squadron, doing a deal together where you've got to make sure you're still doing everything openly and transparently. If you want to do something along these lines, you've got to get permission from the Office of Local Government. So where we're at the moment is Squadron have talked to us about that. We think it's a good idea for them to build something on our sewage treatment plant. We've got to get permission from the Office of Local Government. We just got news last week that the Office of Local Government has sent us a letter to say, yes, we're comfortable with where you're headed with this PPP with Squadron Energy. We think it'll be a good outcome for the community to go down this path, so continue your negotiation. So we haven't come to a final conclusion yet, but at least now we know we've got the all clear from the Office of Local Government, continue our negotiations, and what we ultimately want to achieve is an extra facility at our sewage treatment plant. Sure, water would be used in the short term by Squadron because they've built the facility. In the long term, Dubbo residents would benefit from that.
Anything to help save water and watering the fields that we have, because we've got so many around town.
Exactly right. And not all of them, but some of them we do use potable water on now. Some of them we do use water that comes straight from the river. But again, anything that we can use some of that water from the sewage treatment plant makes sense to me.
Okay, now this is a good one. Now the goats at the Wellington Caves, that's saving money on petrol, I'm guessing.
Well, it's saving money on labour, it's saving money on petrol. It's actually a really good solution. We've got the Wellington Caves. Dubbo Regional Council obviously manages the Wellington Caves and the area around there. You've got farmers that are basically adjacent to some of the land there. They're worried about some of the growth of some of the area there because you'll get into another bushfire season next season or the season after or the season after. That presents a risk for those the farmers around that area, the landholders around that area. It costs us money to keep that trim back. We've had some discussions with the Rural Fire Service, and they've got a trial they've been conducting, and they've got an extension of that trial now, where they're using goats to keep some of the growth down, and they actually basically put an area, they put electronic fences, just temporary electronic fences around an area, and the goats graze that area, they move that, they graze that area. So it costs them a little bit of money just for labour to move that electric fence around, but apart from that, it's fairly cost effective, and then you're using goats to actually trim down that area. So if you go down past the Wellington Caves, you might see some goats in the area around the caves there. That's all part of a plan with Council and the Rural Fire Service to keep the growth down there to try and prevent bushfire hazard in years to come.
Well, it's also good for the environment because you're not using the petrol to drive the whippersnippers and the mowers.
It makes absolute sense. You're spot on there, Chris. So I do like the solution. It's a natural solution, if you like.
Indeed. Now, this report about the Dubbo regional markets, the livestock markets, in the hearing about 23 million sitting in the bank account. What's the latest news on that?
I've been hearing a few stories about Dubbo makes a lot of money out of the sale yards, and we've got $23 million sitting in a bank account somewhere. Why would you possibly consider selling them when you've got all this money sitting there? So just a couple of things on this. Firstly, we're considering all options. So we've got an expression of interest out at the moment for either someone to buy the sale yards or someone to lease the sale yards. And we're also looking at our own internal operating model and seeing if we can run that in a better way. So we're looking at all options, and that makes sense. This is a community asset. We know we've got to try and run all of our assets in the most efficient way possible. So we're looking at all options there. We don't have $23 million sitting in a bank account somewhere. We've got in a restricted asset, internally restricted asset, we've got just over $3 million sitting there, which people still say, well, that's pretty good, you're making money there, but we've got a lot of infrastructure upgrades that are required over the next 10 years, for example. We've got over $12 million we've got to spend on the assets there. And sale yards are capitally intensive. There's a lot of money spent on the infrastructure there. So we've got to be mindful of that. The sale yards on a year-to-year basis, cash flow basis, when you look at that in simple terms, you say, well, it does make money for the community, so it's putting money back into the community, fantastic. But what that doesn't show is when you have these large capital costs, when you've got to upgrade the infrastructure, and that costs a lot of money. So overall, they don't return a lot of money. In fact, they will often, if you look at it over certain timeframes, they actually lose money to the community. But even if it was making a little bit of money, and let me put this scenario to you, Chris, if I had an asset that made me $100,000 a year, you'd say, oh, that's fantastic, you should keep that asset. But if someone offered you to buy that asset off you for $100 million, and I'm obviously going to an extreme here, you'd say, well, if I take $100 million and take that, even if I only stick that in the bank and get 5% interest, I'm getting $5 million a year. So even though I'm getting $100,000 a year at the moment, that's not a good return on my investment. So when we look at things, it's not just, is it returning any money to council? Is it a good return to council? If we had money sitting in the bank account and we were only getting 0.1% interest, we'd say, well, that's a terrible return on that money. Let's put it somewhere where we're getting a better return for that money. So we'll look at all of that in considering what we do with the sale yards going forward. Whatever we do, whether we run it or we lease it or we sell it, the sale yards will still be there. They'll still be returning money to our economy. And anyone that buys it, for example, if they do buy it, they're not going to put the prices up ridiculously because they want to keep the customers coming through. If they put their prices up dramatically, then people are going to go to other sale yards. So that's the last thing you want to do if you lease the sale yards or buy the sale yards. So the asset will still be there. The asset will still be returning money to our economy. What's the best way to run it for ratepayers? Or another way to look at it, is it fair that ratepayers are effectively either subsidising that business or not getting the best return, which means you might need a rate rise rather than us selling or leasing those sale yards. So all of these things have got to be considered by councillors, but I can guarantee you, Chris, no decision has been made by councillors yet. We haven't even seen the expressions of interest that come in yet. Councillors will weigh up all of that before they make any decision.
It is one of the largest livestock markets in this area, so it'd be good to keep it in council hands.
Well, and that's an opinion, and certainly that's an opinion you've just expressed. Some people have that opinion. Some people say, why is council running a sale yards? Is that your core business? Roads, rates, rubbish and sale yards? I don't remember that being part of council's normal operation. And councils across the state do end up doing other things outside their core business. So in Dubbo, we've got a childcare centre, we've got an airport, we've got sale yards, we've got a caravan park. They're not part of our core business. I know there are other centres, other particular councils that I can think of that run things like a doctor's surgery or a hairdressing studio. Councils end up doing things the community needs to deliver what the community wants. But do you need to hold on to those forever? That sale yards was started in 1950. 74 years later, is it essential for council to own those sale yards? I'm not sure. Let's have a look at what's out there. Let's have a look at the different options available to us before we make any decision.
Well, you'll be able to keep us posted when you come in next time for the next council meeting update with us here on DCFM 88.9.
Absolutely right. Thanks, Chris.
Well, thanks for coming in and talking to us once again, Matthew. It's been a pleasure on DCFM 88.9. Great to have you along.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, we're going to get back into some more music very soon, right after this.